Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to tonight's kind of midnight bonus. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and guys, it definitely matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's bonus. Shall we? Today's first part of the upload. I was an infantryman during the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. We entered Baghdad, then occupied an airfield north of the city. Then we headed north on Highway 1. Most of my unit remained in Tikrit, Saddam's hometown, but my company continued north with the 66th Armored Regiment towards a huge enemy ammunition depot near Baji. We began to operate in the area and then soon moved to the nearest airfield, K2, and established a more permanent post. There was an abandoned residential area at K2 Airfield not far from the end of the runway. This was the lodging for the Iraq Air Force and operated the base, but they left before we arrived. What was strange is that it seems to have been abandoned long before our invasion. There were pots and pans in the sink, clothes hung on a rope, but everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. The marauders were there, of course. They were everywhere at the time, but they took almost nothing from there. My unit moved to the end of the airfield, to several bombed-out warehouses, and another company moved to the largest houses in the abandoned residential area that we began to call the Ghost Town. But they left thereafter about a week. I asked one of the very tired-looking military men why they fled from there, because we all envied the fact that they lived in real houses, albeit abandoned, dilapidated, and not in bombed-out warehouses like us, and I was curious to know the reason of their leaving so soon. He said that they could not sleep there because the doors of the apartments were opening and closing at night, and they also heard footsteps running back and forth along the corridors, and then finally they began to see children's faces looking at them through the windows. The U.S. Army, of course, does not believe in ghosts, but you understand that in order to force their command to withdraw their entire company from a ghost town, some very tangible events had to happen that affected their combat readiness. Their move meant that now our residence was the new perimeter of our point closest to the ghost town, so now every night we provided night security for our warehouse. Each of us had an hour shift, and the watch lasted all night. We had thermal sights, night vision, and we sat and scanned the desert looking for enemy activity. During the shift, we all heard sounds as if children were laughing and playing somewhere all night. It looks like there was a playground in the ghost town, but we checked it with our thermal imaging, and it was always empty. Pebbles were often thrown at us. We sat on watch seemingly in pairs and heard laughter when something was throwing stones at us. Nothing fancy, but imagine seeing stones bounce off your face, your helmet, and your vest. All this time we scanned with night vision equipment. Never saw anyone. This happened night after night. We all talked about it with each other, and nobody was happy with it, but we gradually got used to this state of affairs. In 2004, our command changed, and upon learning of this strange situation, our new commander began to convince us there is no supernatural activity in this ghost town, only enemy activity. This was partly true because from the direction we had several times been attacked with sniper fire and RPGs. So we decided to organize a night patrol and ambush the ghost town every night. We were already busy looking for weapons of mass destruction during the day, raiding Saddam's baths at night. We had 18 to 36-hour patrols, guarding convoys, more patrols, a show of force ambushes, a lot of work. And now this as well? So we started doing these patrols. My squad made a new patrol several times, and when I walked through the ghost town, it always seemed too dark. From the time of colonialism, an old British fort with firing ports and towers remained there. Sidewalks, streets, and pretty decent houses were all empty. While patrolling, we could still hear children playing somewhere, but these sounds here seemed as faint and muffled as when we were guarding the perimeter. We climbed on the roof, ambushed, and just listened. Howling winds, children's voices, and more. We were patrolling a ghost town with a modified wedge one night. One of our soldiers suddenly exclaimed, "What the fuck?" and then shouted, "What the hell is this?" He aimed his weapon in the middle of our formation, then dropped his weapon and ran away. He ran alone in the dark, unarmed, in the middle of a battle zone, trying to get away from everyone. Those of us who looked where he pointed had seen it. Those of us who looked at the fleeing soldier heard this. With us was a solid shadow, slightly human-like, tall, with long arms, thin legs, and very narrow torso. He turned his head back and forth, as if surprised to be found. He bent down and then jumped. He squatted down on the nearest mesh fence, still facing us, and turned his head to look at us. Then his eyes quickly flashed red, and then he jumped off the fence and disappeared into the night. We caught up with the escaped soldier. Our detachment was furious. He was scolded a little, as he completely lost his composure, screamed and cried. This soldier was once a brave soldier. I personally saw him shoot the enemy at close range. We've all been through a lot, and we were confident and competent. And what we saw that night was not the worst that we experienced in this war. But the common enemy was clear to us all, and this creature was not. This was by far the most disturbing thing I had ever seen, as it seemed to have a goal of keeping up with us. From that moment, when it was our turn to patrol the ghost town, our squad leader led us to the outskirts, and we just sat in ambush. I'm sure we all appreciate it to this day. Today's second encounter is a subscriber's submission. The encounter my brother and I had happened in the late 80s or early 90s, I'm not sure. It was the second day of deer season in southern Ohio. My brother had a .358 Winchester and I had a .308 Ruger, which you are not supposed to be hunting with. The farm we hunted on was rented by my dad's brother. I've hunted on this farm from 1966 when I had turned 13. The day had started early, like all deer hunts do for us, on the stand by 5:30. I was sitting on a fallen log with my back to the woods facing a freshly shelled cornfield. My brother was 50 to 60 yards to my right, sitting on a tree stump facing the same field. Around 10, my brother started shooting, so I stepped out, thinking maybe to get a shot at the deer. Also, only when I stepped out, it wasn't a deer my brother was shooting at, but what looked like a giant German shepherd charging at him on its hind legs. So I raised my rifle and shot, hitting it on the right shoulder, and the second shot hit it in the head. It fell right down as it swiped at my brother, and I ran to where he was. He had a slash on his left shoulder. I think his coat kept it from being worse. So we got to our Jeep and took him to our uncle's house and called for the squad. When it came, so did the sheriff and the ODNR, because my aunt said it was a wild animal attack. I have a friend I knew from the ODNR that was hunting on the other farm. He arrived also. My brother went in the squad, and I took everyone back to look at what we described to look at. No one believed us, so seeing is believing. This thing we had shot looked like a werewolf, long black hair, like a wolf. Its belly fur was white, paws and fingers like a raccoon, only huge, and claws 3 to 4 inches long. Rear feet look like a raccoon, only about 15 inches long. Teeth like a giant dog/wolf, very muscular upper body, and the legs were not wolf-like, in that way more man-like. Long, dog-like muzzle, pointed ears on the top of its head. My brother had shot it 4 times in the chest area. I had shot twice, once in the right shoulder area and the head shot. No one from the ODNR or the sheriff knew what it was, and they took tons of pics of it. It was before I had a cell phone, and I didn't have a camera. I asked my friend from the ODNR if he would get me and brother some pics. He said yes, and a few weeks later I asked him about the pics, and he said none of them developed. This is what my brother told how this unfolded. He said that he saw 3, what he said he thought was 3 German Shepherd dogs coming across the cornfield, kind of loping along toward him. And he didn't give it much thought because a neighbor farm had some dogs, but as they came closer, he noticed that they were huge. So he started keeping a closer eye on them. He said when they got about 100 to 125 yards and they stopped, he said the larger one growled and looked like it was smiling/grinning. The other 2 started running to my brother's right, and the larger one stood on its hind legs, charged at him. That's when he started shooting, and I came to the picture. They decided to wait till the next day to retrieve the body. So they left a new ODNR game warden there to stay overnight, and all through the night he heard howls and shrieks, his words. He had fallen asleep later, and when he woke, something after 8, the werewolf body was gone, so nothing was ever done or said about it that I know of ever again. Also, on the new ODNR guy's truck was strange handprint on both doors. Also, I've asked now my retired ODNR friend about the pics several times, usually every time I see him. Says he doesn't know what I'm talking about. Also, this thing looked like a werewolf in Van Helsing movie, exactly like it. Brother was fine, just giant scratch marks on his shoulder and across his chest. Can't even hardly see them today, but gave up hunting after that. I still hunt there to this day, but always take plenty of firepower and ammo. Me and him talk about it some, but he won't talk to anyone else about it. And you are the only one I've ever told this story to, other than my family. If you think the story is worth sharing, you may, just don't say who wrote it. So then he attached a couple things. Also, brother's injuries were listed as a dog bite. Jeff, it was the first day of gun season in Ohio. Second, the thing smelled really bad, like wet dog and roadkill. That was a few days old. Don't know if I said that before. Sorry, Jeff, old memory. Creature was about 7.5 feet tall. My brother also said when the first one saw them, they were on all fours, but walked very odd, and also said when the big one charged on its hind legs, the other 2 ran off on all fours. Now, I've got this gentleman's phone number, and I know that he didn't want me to mention his name, so I'm not going to, but I'm going to ask if he'll come on the show. I always respect anonymity, everyone, so if you do have an encounter and you want to share it, you never have to tell us your name or anything like that. So I'm hoping that he will agree to come on and share everything that I just shared with you in his voice. I think it'd be an amazing upload if I could, maybe he could get his brother and himself on. But, I understand it's, you either get, how I always say, you either, once you have an encounter, you are just ready to learn more about these things, or you just become very depressed and kind of turn into not a recluse, but an emotional recluse, if that makes any sense. I don't know. Hopefully this guy will agree to come on, because I think it'll be an amazing interview. All right, moving on with the last part of the bonus upload. Today's final part of the upload. Trey Hudson toured Afghanistan with the U.S. military and now heads up a paranormal hunting group. One particular experience has convinced him the legendary Bigfoot exists. Paranormal Investigator has claimed one of his team witnessed the legendary beast Bigfoot, rumored to roam North America, but it vanished without a trace. Trey Hudson, who is the director of the Oxford Paranormal Society and served in the U.S. military in Afghanistan as Operations and Counterterrorism Officer, talks about some of the phenomenon he says his team has witnessed. He's been leading paranormal expeditions at a top-secret location known only by its code name, The Meadow. And his new book, The Meadow Project, Exploration into the South Skinwalker Ranch, has just been published, leaping to number 1 in Amazon's paranormal section. Over the years, Trey claims to have witnessed some truly bizarre things, and one of the expeditions has made him consider that Bigfoot could be more than flesh and blood and have special powers. A being described as similar in appearance to Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, was allegedly spotted by a member of his team in the middle of the night in a chilling encounter. Recalling the event, Trey said, "It was about 2 or 3 a.m. He saw a white humanoid-type shape peering around the tree watching our camp. He went to get one of our team members who has some very sensitive piece of thermal equipment, a very expensive FLIR unit, to see if she could detect the heat signature of this being, and by the time she woke up and gathered her wits in the equipment and got out there, the entity, or being, was gone. Even weirder, he said there was also no physical evidence of a figure or animal standing in the same spot when they investigated." Trey added, "It's interesting to note many members of my team are also trained in tracking. We know how to track a person through the forest, look for footfalls, disturbances in the environment, compressed earth, compressed vegetation, etc. We went to the area where he had seen this, looking for any disturbed vegetation, scruff marks in the bark on any tree or anything, and we could find no evidence this creature was there in physical form. Of course, a plausible explanation for there being no evidence of a figure standing in the spot could simply be because it never existed in the first place. But Trey remains open-minded about Bigfoot theory and believes the experience proves the mythical creature is both living animal and dimension-hopping manifestation. He explained human beings have these amazing abilities to transcend our three-dimensional nature, so we can actually project ourselves, our thought form, into another dimension. Is it not reasonable to think that maybe Bigfoot and other animals also have these abilities? Maybe their abilities are either on par or exceed our abilities, and they can take in and out of existence at will. Is Bigfoot flesh and blood? I think yes. Bigfoot may be paranormal. Maybe answer once again yes. The Bigfoot trans-dimensional? Once again, maybe the answer is yes. All right, everyone. I hope you all had a wonderful day. And for those of you who are just starting the day off, I hope you have a wonderful day. This is just a little treat, a little bonus, midnight bonus, I guess. Sitting in the studio, nothing else to do except patiently wait for lab results. So I figured, why not? Let's do an upload for you guys. You guys do so much for me. And with that, I want to thank you all. May the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life. Please, everyone, stay safe.